Hello everyone and welcome back to a new very exciting interview. Today we're meeting one of the most internationally experienced musical theatre actors. Born in South Africa and with almost 15 years of stage credits, he's currently playing the title role in the world tour of Andrew Lloyd Webber's hit show The Phantom of the Opera. For those who haven't realized yet, we're talking about the remarkable Jonathan Roxmouth. Welcome to our show, Jonathan.
Thank you so much for having me.
So, going back to the very inception of your career, when I was researching for this interview, I saw that you were beat by the performing bug at a very early stage of your life, right?
Yes. I was like a few years old, if that, and in my home country, South Africa, there was a series of adverts that had babies dressed as adults, miming to adults, so similar to the movie Look Who's Talking. And I was the financial advisor in one of those adverts, and it was a big board meeting, and I was sort of a performer from that age without even realizing. And I'm actually looking for those tapes now to try and find them again, because it's a part of advertising history back home.
Mm-hmm. Did you do anything else apart from that before starting training in the performing arts and doing your degree in performing?
Well, I don't hold any degrees, and I didn't do any training. I was in the fortunate position to go to two schools, a primary school and a high school, who had exceptional drama departments that would do, the annual musical or the annual play or play festivals, that sort of thing. And between the two, Robin Hills Primary and Northcliffe High School, I really think that I got a good idea of what performing would be like. For instance, our high school, we had a principal who said that if the rugby boys could go on tour, so should the drama boys. So what we would do is, for a week every year, we would tour to Durban in South Africa, where they had this magnificent theatre where we would run our high school musical for about a week and a half as a professional company, so that the learners could figure out what the theatre required. And by the end of my high school career, I'd done 5 musicals like that. So that was kind of the best training, in the sense that it was all practical. It wasn't theoretical. It was all learning on the ground, figuring out how to do a mic check, what to do in a theatre, how to act backstage, what to do with an audience, all of that. It was an extraordinary opportunity, and they are still doing it.
Very, very interesting. Would you say that should be the way that any performer should train, instead of, as you say, theoretically?
I wouldn't say that. Every performer is different, of course. Every performer has a different set of skills. And for my particular set of skills, that was exactly what I needed. And it was exactly what made me blossom. But for the rest of it, it's certainly, I think learners of all capabilities, learners of all levels of interest, I should say, get something really useful out of that model. And to this day, they started in 1999 doing this tour, and it's 2020. It's 21 years old now that it's doing, and they're still doing it every year. And lots of learners go on to following careers in the arts because of that program. So certainly, it's valuable.
Was that the way that you discovered that musical theatre was one of your passions?
Oh, without question. I knew that I liked being on stage, making an audience laugh, and I knew that I enjoyed music. The idea to put two of them together in musical comedy, for instance, was a revelation to me. And certainly the first time I got a laugh from an audience was a bit like opening Pandora's box for me, because from there on, it was hopeless. That's all I wanted to do, to the point that I almost neglected my studies, because I just wanted to rehearse and research and do all of that. I got through, and I graduated, but certainly by the end of high school, I think it was clear to everybody in my family what I wanted to do.
Very, very interesting. One of your first jobs, or I think that your first professional musical theatre job, was in Greece, I think. So how did that opportunity came to you?
Well, 2 weeks before I was writing my final exams, the high school was contacted about a production of Greece that was looking for a younger cast, because Greece takes place in high school. And The only part that hadn't been cast yet at that point, that they were still looking for and couldn't find, was the part of the teen angel, which was, beauty school dropout.
Yeah.
And I went along and I auditioned because the director, his name was Ian von Memety, he was a big idol of mine. And I went along half to audition for Grease, but also half just to meet him. And by the end of that audition, I mean, he used to tell me by the end of that audition, he knew that he discovered me and I had discovered him as a mentor and a learner, if you like. And I got the call a few days later, and I sat down to write my final exams, the only person in the room with a job the following year. So it was an amazing feeling, and
very impressive.
My mother said, take a gap year and do the show, then you can be a criminal lawyer after that. And I'm on that gap year, to be honest.
That's very nice. Do you have any special memories, any fond memories from that particular experience from your time in Greece?
Oh, goodness me. That show was produced by a company called the Barnyard Theatre Company. If ever I can credit any group of people with my training, I would credit the Barnyard Theatre, because it was supper theatre, which meant that the patron who would go to the barnyard, the average patron would go to the barnyard, wanted to have a good time. And if they didn't have a good time, they'd let you know. So you had to be on your toes. You had to deliver night after night, or that, they would boo, or they didn't enjoy, they'd let you know. And it was amazing for me to be in an environment where there was such a, not a brutality, but an honesty. Because when you fluff a line once, you never forget what that feels like, and you never want to do it again. And it was a sort of baptism of fire for me. And I learned so much. The best memory I have from that entire production was we had a triple show day once. And by the end of the second show, I was really, really tired. And one of the people in the cast was a wizened actress. And she said, they paid, you didn't. Give them their money's worth, or you shouldn't be here. And I've never forgotten it, because it's such an honest way of looking at the theatre as a business as well. It was good to take the romance out of it and realize that if I'm going to do this for my job for the rest of my life, I have to treat it like I would any other profession, with the same respect, with the same expectation, and the same sort of what's the word I'm looking for? Oh my goodness me, not discrimination. What's the word? Oh my goodness me. No laziness at all, and no compromise. That's the word I'm looking for. And I've carried that through all the way.
Would you say that, well, I think that you would say that it is equally important for a performer to be aware both of the art, but also of the business side of the theatre?
Without question. South Africa is a very small theatre industry, and in order to survive, you cannot just rely on musical theatre. I know lots of other musical theatre industries around the world are similar to our model. And in order to really survive, you need to diversify your portfolio to be able to cover all sorts of genres: plays, musicals, revue, cabaret, producing, writing, everything that comes along with it. Skill that you can. I don't think there's anything as overly skilled, too skilled. There's no such thing. Everything you get, I think you should do. And Peter Turin is South Africa's foremost theatre producer, and I was under his wing for many years, where he taught me the reality of a budget, the reality of the ticket buyers, that you mustn't wait for people to buy tickets, you must go out there and sell tickets. The business side of theatre, I think, is the most overlooked in favor of the glamour of theatre, or the perceived glamour of theatre. And it's for that very reason why people end up struggling financially, because they forget that it's a business. Any freelance worker, regardless of your profession, savings and pension plans and medical aids and hospital plans and retirement annuities, those are the most important things that we should be focusing on, not living week to week, because that's when we're paid. And I think most universities should, because some do, but most universities should consider a financial course in the art program. How to survive on a budget, what compound interest is. Every actor in the world who's a freelance worker will agree that compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world.
Mm-hmm.
And all of these things aren't taught. You know, the obvious things, singing, acting, dancing, the training of it is taught, but the living of it isn't. And I think there's a big gap in training around the world that really should be closed, because it would save a lot of time and stress and encourage a better sense of community in terms of understanding the harsh realities of what we choose to do with our lives.
Mm-hmm. And also because there are, you know, this kind of artists that tends to think, well, I'm an artist, and if you don't understand my art, it's your problem. And they don't realize how important it is, you know, to try to understand the audience and what they like and try to give them something that they may enjoy.
100%. You know, I believe that having artistic integrity is everybody's right, but it's your responsibility to make sure that you can keep surviving to put that integrity into play.
Exactly.
So it's about getting that balance of selling out with integrity in order to keep your position as an artist alive, and that you're in a position that you can keep churning out work. I mean, what I tend to do is, if I do a compilation show, for instance, I did a show last year called Lenny, Andrew, Steve and Me, which was the music of Leonard Bernstein, Andrew Lloyd Webber and Stephen Sondheim. Now, obviously, Andrew Lloyd Webber is the most commercial and the most well-known. Sondheim is not particularly commercial. And of course, Leonard Bernstein, almost forgotten aside from West Side Story. But I insisted on doing a good balance of material from all of them, where they would get the ones that they know and love from Cats and Phantom, but then I would insist on putting something from Passion in there. I would insist on putting something from Candide, Sunday in the Park with George, because I believe with this sort of material, I always compare it to introducing somebody to blue cheese. You don't start them with a Stilton. You start off with a nice mozzarella or an Edam or a mature cheddar, and you work your way up to, you know, Roquefort or something like that. Because I firmly believe that we have to challenge our audiences, but they should never ever feel condescended to or feel like somebody's wagging their finger. You should know this. It's all about how you introduce the material. And it's about a compromise on both sides with the same goal. And everybody has a different process, of course. You know, if you look at what Lin-Manuel Miranda did with Hamilton, that is the number one lesson of the decade in terms of introducing something new to an audience who is used to something in another way. Nobody felt cheated. His artistic integrity was maintained. The financial side of it was looked after. It turned out to be a commercial hit. He kept the same audience in that theater, and it's now one of the hottest tickets on Broadway. It's a fable for anybody who wants to create in the theater specifically.
Now that you mentioned Andrew Lloyd Webber, going through your credits, you have played in Cats, you have performed in Cats, you have performed, I think that also in Sunset Boulevard. You are now obviously playing the Phantom. So it seems that Andrew Lloyd Webber has a great role in your career, doesn't he?
Oh my goodness, yes. I hands down, he's the most prolific composer in my career. And I'm very, very happy and proud about that, because I am a huge fan of what he has done. I think as an industry, we owe a lot to him. And, you know, the partnership with Macintosh and, sorry, I beg your pardon, Cameron Macintosh and Hal Prince is a large portion of why we have a lot of the shows that are still packing audiences in and touching people. And I find his music, he knows how to write a tune, and there's something in what he writes that has a hook to it that you remember when you leave the theater. And, you know, it's all about repeat business. And again, I bring it back to the business of show. Yes, these shows are gorgeous spectacles, and there's so much heart to them. And you have the people who like it, and you have the people who don't like it, about anything that is created in the theater. For me, he has that magic touch. And Phantom, I think, because it was such a personal project for him, it has the most incredible impact on people to this day. I mean, from 1986 to now, it's still having the same effect on audiences.
Exactly.
That means something.
Mm.
And I'm extraordinarily proud to be part of it and in this role, because it is my dream role and my favorite production. So I honestly, it's still a little difficult to believe at times, but I really connect with it every night in a fresh way. And there have been other shows that I've been in where I've not been able to. It is never difficult for me in this show, and I think that's the magic of Andrew Lloyd Webber. He gives the actors something that they can discover time and time again.
As you were mentioning, this show is incredibly popular, and now since it premiered in London in 1986, the show is now 34 years old, and it's still incredibly appealing, and it's appealing to new generations. Why do you think this is happening? I mean, how can, something that is, well, let's say, not in a very polite way, so old can be, so fresh and so appealing 34 years after?
I think there are three reasons. Number one, most of it is told through music, which is a universal language. So that explains why it's touring around the world constantly, no matter where you are. It doesn't matter what the language is in the country that it's touring, because the music tells the audience what's going on every single time. So they can relate to that. Number two, Phantom has become an heirloom. And when I say that, I mean grandparents who saw the original with Michael Crawford and Sarah Brightman brought their kids to the show 20 years ago. Those kids have now had children, and they bring their kids, and it's passed down through many families as a sort of tradition. Certainly in London, it became a tradition, Christmas time or birthdays or New Year's, you'd go to Her Majesty's. And that's gone all around the world. That's my story. My grandparents handed it down to me. And it goes into a pantheon of shows that very few shows get to, that are constantly handed down from generation to generation as part of a family's tradition. I think that's extraordinary. The other point that must be made is, Phantom itself is set in a different time period. It's not set in the 80s. It's not set in the 90s. It's set in the 1800s. So it's so far removed from us that it'll always be timeless. It'll always be once upon a time. It's like if you think about Beauty and the Beast, for instance, it's set in a time that is no longer, that we always want to look back to and go, oh my goodness. So you always look at it as a period piece, which always has longer life than a current piece set now, because it dates so quickly. Phantom can't date because it's hundreds of years ago.
That's
amazing.
True. That's true. Also, this production, the World Tour, has been, as we were discussing before the interview, it's an incredible example of how the theatre can be saved to its full capacity. Because for those who don't know, and that are defending that we should have socially distanced shows, those people don't realize that if a theatre doesn't have at least an 80% capacity, the show is not going to break even, and it's going to, lose money. But the remarkable thing about these two is that now it's in Taipei, but before it was in South Korea during, the most, the hardest moment of the pandemic, and it was still running and running, and there was no problem with it. Well, yes, it's a remarkable example of how the theatre can be safe, and how we should, be fighting for the theatres to reopen and shows to be open again.
Certainly. I mean, we call him the boss, but Andrew Lloyd Webber had a wonderful video that he posted recently where he explained the problem is to just say, okay, you may open the theatres with so many people in, because people do not understand. And I don't judge people for this. I understand why. I think maybe we need to do something in order to better explain how the finances of theatre works. It is a handmade enterprise, which means it's not all machinery. It's not like a factory. It requires people, and people cost money. That is why you have bigger theatres, because there are more people in the theatre that can pay for the people behind the scenes. Phantom is no exception. And I think what Andrew Lloyd Webber spoke about so brilliantly is that it's not like turning a tap on. that you can just go, like a movie house puts a film on, you say, right, there's the film, the audience can come in, it's done. Phantom has over 145 people on stage every night.
Mm-hmm.
Think about what that costs, just that.
Mm-hmm.
Now put into account theatre rental, now put into account, rights and royalties, running costs, all of that. It adds up. And most of the time, yes, as you say, break-even points are about 80% capacity per show.
Exactly.
And, socially distanced theatres means that there has to be 1.5 meters distance radius between people. That ends up being around 34% of the audience.
Mm-hmm.
That does not even cover the rent.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I wish that we could find a way to help people all around the world, because this is not just a problem in any one country. This is a problem around the world. It must be. Because I never ever want anybody to feel like we are picking any country out, because everybody has it to a degree.
Mm-hmm.
I think because show business seems to run so beautifully, and because people don't speak about the figures, it's assumed that they aren't there.
Yeah.
So maybe what needs to happen moving forward is we need to be slightly more clear on what things cost.
Yes.
And unapologetically so, because I do believe you can. But that aside, it's also got to do with an attitude that, people want to go to the theatre to escape. And I don't want to follow rules going to the theatre. I just want to sit and enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
But if we look at a case study like South Korea or Taiwan, people sit in that theatre masked up, not touching, doing the thermal scanning, doing the temperatures, doing all of that, and working, because the trace track method really does yield results. It makes why, but there are all sorts of conspiracy theories around the world which we're not going to go into. The bottom line is, not one person believes that it could only happen in Korea or Taiwan, because if that were true, it wouldn't have happened in both.
Yeah, exactly.
There has to be a shift. We're getting there. We have somebody like Andrew Lloyd Webber who is leading from the front, doing extraordinary things, making it very clear what it will take.
Yeah.
Time will tell. What I will say is my personal hope is that there's going to be a phoenix effect, that people have been denied theatre for so long. It's like cold turkey in a way. Not, we just have Thanksgiving, so I don't mean to come up with turkey puns, but I hope that what happens is that people get a craving for theatre, knowing what life is like without it. And in order to never live like that again, they fill our theatres again in a way that they never used to.
Yeah.
I stopped people taking theatre for granted.
Yes. Yes, I agree. Because also those, people who usually take it for granted are the same people that usually complain about how expensive the theater is, but they don't realize everything that you said, how expensive it is to produce a show.
Certainly. If you think about it this way, if you build a car, you have 5 or 6 machines that do all the riveting and the bolting and the welding and all of that. If we were to build a car for the theatre, it would have to be built in 3 separate workshops with different staff available. Framework, bodywork, paintwork, finishing. It's actually 4. And then it has to be delivered, so it's 5. It's a completely different way of doing things, because the theatre, everything has to be made. You can't buy a car for production. It has to be built in a certain scale to look normal on stage. There's so much more to it. I watched a series called oh goodness me, it was the American Theatre Wing. Has a whole bunch of documentaries about careers in the theatre, and they discuss the finances in various departments: lighting, sound, props, construction. I encourage people to go and watch that. That taught me more about the theatre than anything else you can find on the web.
Yeah. Also, now moving away from the Phantom, you're releasing a new album for this Christmas, right?
I am.
What can you tell us about it?
So funny that you mentioned that, because I've just been speaking to my engineer in South Africa. His name is Adam Howard. He runs a studio, Howard Audio, and he has spent the weekend doing the final mixes to Swingle Bells. So, backtracking, Adam has always been playing trumpet on my concerts and albums before. I started recording my albums at his brand new studio in 2015. He and I developed a very good working relationship. And in the meantime, he started the Johannesburg Big Band. and had been bugging me for, not bugging, but mentioning many, many times, we should do something together, you and the big band. What about Christmas? And this year, because it was such a disgusting year for most people around the world, I love Christmas. So I thought, well, maybe this is the year.
Yeah.
And we came up with something called Swingle Bells, which is a big band Christmas album in spite of Corona. You know, most people don't want to do anything, so they postpone or cancel because of Corona. We weren't doing that this time. And it's a 14-track album with an 18-piece big band as well as a 24-piece string section. And we do everything from the classics. Obviously, we do Jingle Bells, which we call Swingle Bells. We do Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas, the Christmas song itself. But then there are also some fun tracks on there, like All I Want for Christmas or Dig That Crazy Santa Claus. Santa Claus is coming to town. It's really turned out to be the most wonderful collaborative project, because every single musician who played on that album, when they came into the studio and saw everybody, it was the first time they picked up the instruments since March. So there was a reunion that took place in the studios before we even played. So we've captured that reconnection, which has resulted in, for me, probably the most exciting album I've done so far, other than Phantasm. Phantasm came about in a very simple way. I'm playing the Phantasm, and I've always wanted to be able to record that music, but I never got round to it because there's always been an issue with timing or something like that. And I was very grateful that the really useful group, Andrew Lloyd, gave me permission to do something that's not been done before, where we've taken the songs from Phantom and the songs from Love Never Dies, the sequel to Phantom, and put them side by side to tell the full story of the Phantom of Christine from beginning to end in every sense of the word. And I'm before you called, I received the final mixes for Phantasm, so I'm going to sit and listen in a bit. And what's resulted is a full, it's almost a 60-piece orchestra that's recorded Phantasm in all of its glory. It's honestly bigger than anything I ever thought possible. And you really understand what Andrew Lloyd Webber has done by writing this saga between Phantom and Love Never Dies. What he's done musically is quite sensational. When you go back to, listening to, Point of No Return, and then you listen to Beneath a Moonless Sky, you see how connected they are because of the sexual undertone of it. Or if you listen to Music of the Night and then Till I Hear You Sing, you hear the link because of the music and what Christine represents. It's amazing. And what I've done in another sense is it's been recorded all around the world. It's been recorded in Brazil, in Taiwan, in South Africa, in Australia, because I've got most of my previous Christines singing all the duets with me. So we've got Claire Lyon, we've got Robin Buerter, we've got Magdalene Menard, we've got Clara Vidier, and we've got Caitlin Finney, all of whom have played the Christine or the alternate Christine online. Here's my dresser, Denny. How are you doing, Den? This is my dresser, everybody.
Hello, very nice to meet you.
Theatre, as you can see, more people.
More people, yeah.
The album has ended up being probably the crowning moment for Adam and I working together in a studio environment, because it's beyond anything we could have imagined, and I can't wait for people to hear it.
Beautiful. And just to end this interview, after all, as we've discussed, this has been a very hard year for everyone. After all these we've been through, how important do arts and the theatre and the performing arts are in everybody's lives? How important they are and how important they should be?
My goodness. I think because we're in a time where there's real life and death situations out there, I never ever think that we're saving lives here on in the theatre. I think lots of people can, again, they go into the glamour and the romance of it. What I will say is the isolation that everybody has made them turn to movies or music or television or anything, entertainment, YouTube. All of that is actually the arts. All of that is entertainment. And therefore, what I would say is that it's a reminder of what makes us human. And art is specific to human beings. Yeah. In a time where we can't connect with each other, people have turned to art. That should tell us something. If anything, It's a reminder of just how important it is to us, whether subconsciously or deliberately. It's clear that we need it, along with air and water. It's necessary. And I think this sounds so morbid, but I can't wait to see what art comes out of COVID.
Yeah.
What stories we will hear, what art we will see, what music we will hear, what dance will be performed. As awful as it has been, this could be the source of inspiration that will define our generation.
Yeah.
And I look forward to seeing that.
Yeah. Well, this has been a lovely interview. Much.
Thank you so very much. Live here from the Taipei Arena with Dennis, getting my costumes ready for our final performance of the week.
Yes, because you have today you have 2 shows, right?
Yes, I'm between shows at the moment. I do my final show of the week in a bit, and then we have a final week in Taipei next week.
Fantastic. Well, we hope you break a leg in the next performance.
Thank you so very much, Clemo. Much appreciated.